Hello there and welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to another archived project from the vault. Today I have a perfectly Halloween-themed 1940s dress to share with you all that I made a couple of years ago over on Patreon. And seeing as my personal life is slightly hectic right now, I thought we'd go ahead and dive into this project from the past. But I did have fabric set aside to make this dress this month. I was inspired by this 1940s dress that I saw for sale with Lilies and Remains, Sarah of Lilies and Remains, a top 1940s vintage seller over on Etsy, so make sure to check out her shop. I will link it below. But this dress is one that she sold, I think, in the last year or two or so. I remember I pinned it thinking I would love to make this only with Halloween colors. So that is what I'm going to go ahead and do today. Try and replicate this dress, not exactly, but quite closely, with this is a rayon crepe, a rayon twill today, which of course is always nice and slippery, so a great first project back from being sick in bed. And the only big change I wanted to make to this design was to actually do a split front on this. You saw me do that with the black and green brocade top that I wore for one of my recent lookbooks. I really like doing this kind of dual color split look, and so I'm going to do that with this bodice today as well, adding a contrast front to match the sash. But I have a lot of work to do to make this dress a reality, so let's jump on over to the blue patterning table of doom and get started. And here we are with my sketch and my basic bodice block pattern ready to go. Let me just set my timer on my phone so I know when the camera's going to run out of me, because I can only film 20 minutes at a time before the camera just unceremoniously turns off. It's always fun. But the first thing I'm going to do here is add a 1/2 inch along the center front, because of course this is going to be a split front, so I need a center front seam to facilitate the two different colors of fabric being sewn together. And then I will decide upon my V neckline here. I'm going to take my waist dart and throw it up into the shoulder, quite close to the edge where the sleeve will be, but not too close because you don't want to get in the way of sewing the sleeve in there, so make sure it's within the seam allowance. But I can go ahead and start cutting this out to be able to facilitate the dart manipulation today, because I will be moving both of these around. This has a tuck in the shoulder. The actual dress has a tuck in the shoulder. Here I'm extending the shoulder that 1/4 inch like I usually do up and out for putting a shoulder pad in here later. But I'm going to be throwing some of the dart fullness into the side seam as gathering, and then the rest will be up into this shoulder tuck here. The actual 1940s dress had a quite far over shoulder tuck. It's a little bit different than this one. This is just a simpler version, and I wasn't up for anything more than this, let's face it. And then the actual dress also has like rouging in the side seam as opposed to gathering, but this is going to give an extremely similar effect. You'd have to be quite well versed in these things to notice the difference, really. But at this point I have gone ahead and closed the waist dart, opened that up into the shoulder. I'm going to go ahead and open up these new pivot points or dart points in the side seam and close my side dart here as well. Cut away the excess before I get confused. So now I have all my dart fullness kind of opened up, and I can decide how big I want these sections to be. I'm going to make the shoulder dart a little narrower than half of my dart fullness, basically. Normally I would just put one of the darts up here, but and my darts are normally like the same size, just one on the side and one on the waist. But I'm just going to add more of the fullness into the side seam here, where it will be controlled by gathers. And I'm trying to recycle and use my scraps of paper here, but I need a bigger piece. So I'll just readjust this, and then I can tape everything down, including my floops on the back as well, eventually here, because we're going to have gathering along the side of this buddy. I have done that in that lime and black stripy top that I made on the channel. I put gathering in the side. Haven't done it much. This is going to be a nice floopy fabric to do this in today, so should work really well. So I'm just going to smooth that off, and I cut off a couple of the cornery tips while doing that, and that's just to facilitate this being nice and being able to gather in where I want it. That's where my pleat in the side is going to be. I'm going to sew this dart in the shoulder as a tuck as opposed to a full dart today, and then the rest of this I will just gather down. I'm not going to gather right underneath the arm because I feel like that wouldn't be very comfortable, so I'm going to come down about 3 inches on the side seam and then gather the rest down to the waist. That's everything I need to do here on my split 1940s dress front, like so. And I will go ahead and grab a tracing of my back here from another recent dress. I'm just going to fix this so it's like a regular full tracing again. The shoulder of this tracing has been narrowed, so I'm just going to extend it back out. And again, add that tip up that I did for the front. I'm always tipping my shoulder out 1/4 inch and up 1/4 inch at this point, just because I'm trying to remember to put shoulder pads in all my dresses. I don't remember to film any of the shoulder pad footage for this particular video, but let's just say I was in a bit of a rush to get a lot done in not very much time here for the rest of October, because I have been, of course, delayed. But the back of this is not going to change otherwise. It's just going to be my regular bodice block back. Just made sure it matched up with the shoulder still, all that jazz. I have a facing that's actually drafted to fit that, so back facing already here ready to go, but I will trace a new one for the front. It does look like this dress originally was finished with a facing. If you look closely at the listing images, I'll have the link for this dress, original dress for sale over on Etsy. Below, there's a little bit of iron shine or like some sort of degradation or fading going on with this 1940s dress because, of course, she's an elderly lady. And so you can kind of see where things have been ironed and pressed over the years, that does seem to be a facing finishing this. Always a risk with any rayon, really, and lots of different fabrics, iron shine. Something I'm quite afraid of, honestly. Ooh. Although I do wish I had rayon crepe to work with today, as opposed to rayon twill, but I'm doing the best I've got. There's not a lot of selection of rayon crepe out there. Rayon twill, on the other hand, fabric.com does have some. Every once in a while, Mood has some nice ones as well. So the twills I'll be using today were from fabric.com, and I can link their rayon twill selection below. But for now, I'm just going to use my basic block pencil skirt pattern to go ahead and draft some peplum pieces for this skirt. You can see it's a double layered peplum here. The dress, the original vintage dress, the peplum ends at the side seam. I'm going to make mine extend into the back and dip down a little bit, so you'll see that. I really should just use my A-line skirt pattern to draft the top of this. I'm going to be A-lining this by closing the darts in just a second. I mean, it barely flares it because you can see the distance between the point of the dart and the hem of the 6-inch long peplum here is not very far, so it's not going to flare it a ton. But I'm basically tracing the top 6 inches of my A-line skirt pattern. I just don't have a card version of my A-line skirt in the studio right now. Would be very useful to make one, but I haven't yet. So it's just easier to trace the card than it is to trace this paper. So that's why I just used my pencil skirt and flared it a little bit here by closing these darts. I'm going to fill that in. You can see not a lot of fullness flare being added here. And in fact, I will flare it extra when we get to the back. But this is my front top peplum here. Here's my pencil skirt back. I will use this to make the back peplum. Tracing from the side, marking in my darts, because again, I will use my darts to close them. And again, you'll see me flare this a little bit extra, just because the darts are long enough that they are about 6 inches long, and therefore wouldn't flare this at all. And it does seem there's a tiny, tiny bit of flare in the skirt over in the original dress. I will be using my pencil skirt, or a straight cut skirt, basically, as the main skirt layer of this, although the original 1940s dress does seem to have a flared A-line skirt. That's again because I don't like hemming curved hems in rayon, and I'm already going to have to do the curved hem of both these peplum pieces and the tiny hem in the sleeve today. I'm going to have enough floopy rayon to have to hem that I wanted the hem of the actual skirt to be easy peasy. So, but here I am, just instead of layering this dart closed, I'm layering it closed at the top and flaring it a little bit at the hem. That way I just end up with a little bit of flare on this peplum because it wasn't going to give me any otherwise. And I am making this first layer of the peplum, the top layer of the peplum, I guess, 6 inches long. Honestly, I think the real one is a little bit shorter, but I'm just eyeballing it and kind of guessing. So around 6 inches is what I thought. I think the real one is probably like 4.5 to 5 inches long. So, a little bit. I made all the sections on the skirt. Everything about the skirt I made a little bit long for this. So there's that. I wanted to see where my back dart on my bodice would hit on this peplum, right about here, because I wanted this to end around there, not get too close to my zipper or anything. In the back, it's going to have like a fluttery peplum in the back, you'll see, in the end. So it's going to end about here-ish, and then I will use this first top peplum piece, the 6-inch long one, to draft a 12-inch long layer for underneath. So I want this to be about the same amount, like a same 6 inches showing beneath this, so it's a double layer of ruffle, technically circle cut ruffle like this. It's just not overly circled, overly ruffled, I guess. You could add more fullness to this by making swinging it out and making the waist smaller and the outer edge larger, but of course, the more circular your hem, the more annoying it will be to hem later. So do keep that in mind. But I've just traced that original peplum I just made, and now I'm going around and adding 6 inches on to the length of that, so I can have a double length version to stick out underneath in this. I did just point the back, the very center back of this. I made it extend 1 inch longer than the first peplum, as you can see, and then I pointed the end of it, just, again, for a little bit of a fun take on the back of this dress. This dress had nothing going on in the back in the original 40s version, but I thought it deserved to have a little bit of a ruffle back there. And I will just label this Split 40s Dress 2022 under peplum. Again, both of those will be cut on the fold as well. And then I have to make some pattern pieces for my sash. I'm going to, again, use my regular block skirt pattern here. So here's a tracing of that I keep just pinned to the board next to me because I use it so often. As we know, I've been making way too many dresses lately. So I look forward to visiting every antique mall and cafe in the New England area when I move over there. and being able to wear all my dresses out and about. So one day, you know, dress for the, or like make clothes for the life you want, even if that you haven't been able to start that life yet, right? Something like that. But again, I ended up making these sash sections a little bit too long, or long compared to the original vintage version. I made this 9.5 inches wide and 26 inches long because I was kind of guesstimating and over guesstimating how long this needed to be. This is going to be the top like floop section of the, or like bow section of the sash here. And the original dress has both of these sash sections. Woo, say that 10 times fast. Sash sections, especially with my nasally ill voice. Great. Both of theirs are bag lined or like fully faced with self fabric. And I'm only going to do that for this under sash because it's going to be sewn to 2 layers of skirt and I felt like I could handle it. The top one is just going to get so bulky in this fabric if I did that way. I don't know what kind of rayon crepe they have for theirs. The aqua on that dress might actually even be a really lightweight rayon jersey or something. Without being able to feel the dress, I can't tell. But it's a lot to stitch onto one side of the dress and have it not like eventually stretch very asymmetric and stuff. So trying to save a little bit of weight by doing that top bow as one layer, and I'll do this under pointed layer, again 9.5 inches wide, again 25 inches-ish long, but just with a off-center ribbon cut end like that. So only the under layer of that sash is going to be 2 layers. The top I will leave as a single layer and have to hem the sides. Again, but at least it's straight edges, hemming in rayon. And here I've just traced the top of my sleeve pattern so I can make a small, short little sleeve here. The original dress, once again, I guess I'm making this dress, copying it, and then changing it as I see fit, really. It's going to look similar, but nothing alike. Because I'm tipping the hem of this sleeve up, as you can see in the center, just so that it, again, helps create my, I don't know, hourglass effect that I like with when the sleeves point towards the waist as opposed to cut straight across. The original dress, the sleeves have a straight hem, which is easier to finish that hem. So easier than this. This was okay because I machine hemmed these today. You'll see later. But again, the curvier your hems, the more annoying they are to hem. Unless you're very experienced and these things don't bother you anymore, which congrats. But now that I have everything cut out of my black rayon twill, black and orange rayon twill, this was the only like orange color available. I could have gone with like a rusty brown orange or a kind of dusty peachier orange, which is what I ended up going with. I think it gives a good, like almost makes this dress look vintage and slightly faded kind of a look, which isn't so bad. But I can transfer my darts from my pattern onto my back pieces here, mark those and pin those, set those next to the machine. Then for my fronts, I have the tuck to do at the top here. So instead of marking or like using my awl to poke through this pattern all the way to the dart point, I'm just going to come down. I think I did 4-inch tucks on this for the shoulder. So I'm using my awl to poke holes through my pattern to be able to transfer that down like so. You see, I didn't even measure. Around 4 inches, but I didn't measure it. So I can mark that here on the backs of these pieces, using my trusty colored pencils, of course. And then I'll mark on the sides where I need to gather in between. I will have to grab this later because once I serge that side seam, you won't be able to see these marks, but I had good intentions. But yeah, I think I would have gone with a slightly richer orange if I could choose what colors of rayon are available out in the world. But alas, I am stuck with what we've got, which is not the full range. I can only hope that, you know, there's trends in sewing and crafting and fashion as well. I can only hope that fashion will swing towards rayon crepe again, because in the 80s, I think it was available. Like the 80s and early 90s, I think rayon crepe was still kind of available or had come back into fashion a little bit. And so hopefully the world will swing towards, I don't know, some sort of lyocell or more sustainable rayon textile and make a lot of nice mid-weight dress crepe out of it one day so that I don't have to use rayon twill instead like this. Rayon twill is fine, but rayon crepe is better. And then I do have my regular pencil skirt as the bottom layer of the skirt today, so I do have to put my 4 darts here in the back, and then I'll have 4 darts in the front. So lots of dart marking and sewing to do. And like always, over here on the machine, I'm going to start at the large end of the dart, sew along my pencil marking off the tip, like so, and then I will tie my threads shut at the tip of my dart, as always. And I have a bunch of those to sew, so I'll do it at 1,000 times speed. I wish. Lots of tiny little darts in this floopy fabric. Again, not the world's most fun thing to do. I really like pattern drafting, and I really like designing, and I really like styling, but the sewing of floopy fabrics itself, not my favorite. I love sewing most when I'm sewing cotton sateen. That's right. And then again for the tucks, I'm just sewing this as if it were a regular dart, but instead of going all the way to the point, I just stop 4 inches down, backstitch a little bit, come off the machine, and I'll press that into place. And over here I have my facing pieces. The edges of these are serged, and I can go ahead and pin the shoulder seams of that, set that aside. I really should have actually stay stitched, something you never see me do, stay stitched this neckline just because it's cut at an angle, not full bias, but at an angle for this V-neck on both the facing and this piece here. And the neckline did want to stretch on the bodice of this just a little bit. Would have benefited from some stay stitching, but again, it's a step you never see me do. Mostly because stay stitching is really helpful if you have a loosely woven fabric or something very floopy like this, if you're a beginner, or if you're going to be taking a long time to do the project, like the time between cutting something and sewing it together is going to be a long time where it has more chance to stretch out. But because I made this dress in a day and a half, I wasn't worried about it having time to stretch out any further than it wanted to, like, initially. Hopefully that makes sense. You can see I'm just gathering my sides down to fit the back. This is the orange is the front piece here of the split front. But I've just put 2 lines of gathering stitching along that curve along the side seam, and I'm gathering that down to fit the normal length of my side seam, the original starting length of my side seam, which is what the back is representing for us here. And I will just pull all my threads apart, make sure this fits down properly, and then I can tie off my gathering threads, like so. And again, just evenly space my gathers out and try and pin those down in a nice way. Lots of pins for this usually, just to keep things from getting stuck or tucked where they're not supposed to be. I'd rather use a bunch of pins now than have to unpick this and redo it. Those are the facts. I use a lot of pins in my sewing. Once again, you do you. What matters is the finished result. And while I'm here, I will go ahead and pin my shoulder seam as well. I have not sewn the center front of the split front yet. I'm just going to work on both sides separately and then sew the center front afterwards. Don't really know why I decided to do it that way. You could sew the center front first if you wanted to before doing the side seams. Doesn't really matter. Sometimes the order of operations matters a lot. Sometimes it really doesn't. And just experience and having made hundreds of dresses is what leads me through these things and helps me know what needs to go next. I have no instruction booklet. I just have years of experience at this point, which is hard to achieve without time. But now that those are sewn, 1/2 inch seam allowance as usual, I can go ahead and press them open here, back on the ironing board. Again, you'll notice that I went and serged my raw edges off camera here. So any raw edges that will be free inside this unlined dress, I went ahead and ran them through the serger. Always use like a test piece, run a test piece through the serger if you have one, or overlocker, by the way, serger, overlock, same, to see if the fabric can handle it. Usually, I've put some pretty delicate fabrics through the overlock and it's been fine, so. But I always test a piece if it's a new fabric that I haven't worked with before, because you don't want to find that out the hard way. But now I'm putting together the all black side. So this is the black front with its black back. I could have done an orange back as well. I didn't want to run out of orange fabric. So just making sure that I had enough fabric for the sash and all that jazz. But now that I have both of my sides of my bodice together, I can go ahead and sew that center front, like I said. Could have done this first. Instead, I'm doing it last for the main construction of the body of this. Over here on the machine again, our lovely trusty 99K. I unfortunately did not have any orange thread that matched this in my stash at all, so I ended up using a slightly different shade of like rusty brown orange thread anywhere I needed orange thread. I used black thread for most of this. I did just use orange to sew the tuck of this, just in case the thread showed at all along that seam of the tuck. I wanted it to be orange as opposed to black, or at least close to orange. Closer. But now that my center front is sewn, I can go ahead and pin my facing on, right sides together. I could have also interfaced this facing to help it stay in shape as well, in addition to stay stitching it, which would have been a good idea. But alas, I decided this fabric was thick enough that I did not want to add any more stiffness to it. It probably would have been fine. Honestly, I probably should have interfaced at least the facing of this. Hindsight, you know, it's a beautiful thing. I haven't used this exact rayon twill before. Some are a little bit weightier than others. I don't have like the grams per square meter, you know, on the salvage or anything, so I can't really keep that in mind necessarily, but probably should have interfaced this in the end. And I will just sketch on the 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side of the V, so I know exactly where that point needs to be, and it does need to line up exactly with the switch of the color as well, so I'm going to be careful when I'm over here on the machine to make sure I'm sewing the point of that V-neck right in between the two colors over the seam between the two fabrics at the center front. But I can bring that over here to the machine and stitch on this facing. You'll see me like start and stop a lot down here near the point. I stopped, needed to go a few stitches more. I'm just checking, lifting that presser foot, looking underneath the facing to make sure I'm right in between those two colors before I turn the whole project like this and keep sewing the other side of the V-neck, just to make sure I really am right in between those two colors, because once I clip that V, it's going to be, you know, you can't come back from that unless you want to cut everything out again and try again, which I did not have enough fabric for, certainly. But I will just throw some understitching in here as well. I went ahead off camera and clipped the curves of this, but now I have underneath my right hand, underneath the facing, I have the seam allowance facing my right hand, I guess. Underneath the facing, the seam allowance is facing the right hand side. Oh no, it's underneath here, see? But I'm just going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from my V-neck until I get down to the point, leave the needle down in the point, turn the whole thing again, press your foot back down, and stitch the other side, or understitch the other side. Then I can pin my facing down at the center front to the seam between the colors and at the shoulder seam as well. This, you can see, didn't line up exactly perfect anymore, so that's what I was talking about with having the stay stitching in there. But here's the curvy hem of my sleeves. I'm going to turn this twice, 1/4 inch twice to hem these, but I'll show you exactly the hem finish I'm going to use on this on a spare piece of muslin so you can see what I'm doing, because all the curvy hems in rayon I have to do today are in this black, and the method I'm about to use you would not be able to see what was going on at all if I did black thread on black fabric. So we're going to do a test hem on muslin in just a minute so you can see what I'm going to do. But before I can hem the sleeves, I'm going to go ahead and sew the underarm seam of them. They're very short. But I have this whole peplum, bottom edges of the peplums to hem as well. So I have these curvy bottom hems of this in a floopy fabric. Once again, why did I choose such a floopy fabric as my first project back from being sick in bed when, you know, it's not exactly keeping me motivated to have to work with something so floopy? Goodness knows. It was what was on the schedule. It had to be done. But here's a curved piece of muslin, spare piece of muslin. It was the back of something, some mock-up at some point. Now it's being a mock-up again. But I've done a line of stitching along where I want my hem to be at 1/4 inch up, and I'm going to press this up along that line of stitching. So like so, all the way along. Here, that line of stitching like helps gather the fabric a tiny bit, which is good for these curved edges. And then you can fold it again and have much better, crisper guideline. This really helps. Like, I was thinking to myself, surely this is not going to help that much, but it really helps to have that line of stitching in there. And then you just turn it twice again. It takes a little bit more time, but it's definitely worth it. And then I can bring this over to the machine. You could hand stitch this hem at this point, but I will just go ahead and machine stitch close to the folded edge along the inside like this, and then the outside will have stitching showing. But again, with black thread on black in the rayon, you won't see it much. It would be even more couture to have done it by hand, but we didn't have time for that anymore. We have the couture bit of this comes at the end, where I will be hand stitching sequins, but until then, we gotta save time somewhere. So here are my 2 layers of peplum. The hems are done. The back edges are hemmed as well. The straight edges are hemmed as well. And then I'm just layering those and basting them together. And then I will layer this onto the skirt as well. So this is on the bottom here, we have 3 layers of fabric, again, in all black, of course, being me. So I have the pencil skirt and then the 2 layers of peplum, the underlayer, the top layer. We have all 3 layers here. I'm going to baste this along the waist before I try and sew this to the bodice as well, because I need to sew the bodice to this too, but it's just quite a few layers to keep everything playing nicely. So I decided to go ahead and baste these together first, the skirt and the peplum, and then I'll sew the bodice onto that. Ooh, I'm losing my manner of speaking, or losing my ability for speech. It's not great. I am testing COVID negative now, which is nice because I've had the plague recently, but I do still have quite a cough. In the middle, it's not terrible during the day. As long as I don't move or talk, I don't cough much. But at night, if I lay down all the way, it's like suddenly a terrible feather appears in my throat, like the most tickly throat situation I've ever experienced. Of course, at night when I want to be sleeping. So even cough medicine has not been able to keep up with this. And it doesn't seem to be helping much at all, honestly. Which is lovely. So I'm on the mend, but the cough is very irritating. I think I got about 5 hours of sleep last night because I didn't fall asleep until about 4 a.m. due to this lovely tickle I have going on, which I cannot recommend. But here I am sewing the bodice to that now basted layered skirt situation. It is kind of a lot of skirt and not so much bodice on this. That's why I was thinking this dress is kind of asymmetric and weighted weirdly enough without making that sash super heavy. So that's why I kept the bow part of the sash later, one layer, because I was like, this has enough going on. Honestly, it would be probably better to store this dress flat than on a hanger, because with one side of it weighted down by that sash, it's not the best ideal situation. There are things you can do, like couture-wise, to really elevate this and make the weight of that sash distributed more. If I put a waist tape or waist stay into this dress on the inside here, like a twill tape along the waist, and then had a section of twill tape that the sash was anchored to, that was hanging like inside this dress to help distribute the weight a little more. When this dress is on my body supports the weight of the fabric, and so that's fine. But there are ways to make this a little bit more hanger stable. I'm just not actually concerned with it myself much because, you know, once again, I'm slowly becoming a better seamstress over time. So one day I will be better. But, you know, it is not this day, as we say. But now that the bodice and the skirt are attached, notice I haven't put my sleeves in yet. Did that this time. Don't know why. I'm going to go ahead and actually use some, see here I am, being a little bit more diligent, and putting some lightweight fusible interfacing along my center backs before I set my zipper in here. And I will go ahead and stitch from where the zipper will be below the zipper to the top of my slit. I just left the bottom, 7 inches of this skirt open in the back. You'll see that if you look very closely when I'm modeling at the end. But yes, I've interfaced the back of this before I put the zipper in here. I will not go through putting the zipper in here today. See last month's tutorial to see me put a zipper in a little bit, I think. Every once in a while, I will do the full zipper. I have been talking about recently wanting to do a lapped zipper my way, both machine and by hand. Tutorial for the channel soon, so I kind of want to do that for January. I'm hoping to get that together early next year. A full, how to do a zipper in light colored fabric so we can see what I do, and I'll take my time and show you exactly how I do my zippers. So that individual video will be coming next year sometime. I need to do smaller videos like that, especially because I have a lot going on next year, and I'm going to need to save myself some time somewhere. So detailing smaller techniques is going to be a good time saver for me, and yet still useful for all of you, hopefully, as well. But here I am finally setting my sleeves in. Now that the dress is nearly finished and I have the zipper in, might as well just go ahead and set my sleeves in here. I don't know why I didn't want to do it earlier. It wasn't like it was hard, but here we are. Funny enough, this is the next day, so all of the rest of this video I did in one day, and then here on this day I'm going to set my sleeves in, finish tacking down my facing, putting in my shoulder pads, all that jazz, and then hemming the dress itself. And then the last thing I had to do this day was put the sash together and do 5 or 6 hours of embroidery on the sash. So the setting of the sleeves in was actually the easiest part of this day. But I'm just setting those in over here on the machine, just making sure nothing's getting caught or puckered around, because with thin lightweight fabric like this, it wants to just liquefy and end up all over the place and pucker. So trying to be careful here. I did put a line of gathering stitching into the sleeve cap of these sleeves to help them just flow right over the shoulder, the top of the shoulder. It's not like it actually has gathering. It just, the gathering thread in there helps you control the amount of ease that's built into the sleeve cap of the pattern. When you make your bodice and sleeve pattern from scratch, there is a little bit of an extra ease in the sleeve as opposed to the actual arm side of the bodice, and that is controlled by that gathering stitching put in the sleeve cap normally. But yes, one of the last things to do on this dress was to actually hem the pencil skirt, like the skirt layer. The peplums were already hemmed using that method I showed on the muslin, but this I'm just going to turn up a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch again, and then I will stitch this hem by hand. Even though I machine stitched the other ones, probably could have gotten away with machine stitching this as well. But here again, I'm deciding to take my time. Certain parts of the dress get more attention than others, and this part of the hem, also a pencil skirt hem isn't very long, so it's not going to take me ages. The hems of the peplum are longer and would have taken much more time because they're curved as well, so might as well just do this one by hand. I would feel bad not doing it by hand if it was this small. So just turning that up twice and pinning it in place, putting a podcast on so I can go ahead and stitch this buddy by hand. And then I just have the sash to contend with. So this is the top sash bow bit, 26 inches by 9.5, as you can see. I should have gone a little bit shorter. Probably should have gone with like 20 inches as opposed to 26, honestly. But I will, again, instead of doubling this and turning it right side out and making a proper sash, I am just going to turn the long sides of this twice, 1/4 inch twice. And you can see on a straight edge, no problem. I don't have to put that stitching in. It's just a curved edge. It's very irritating to hem in a floopy fabric, so I recommend stitching a 1/4 inch away from the edge and then turning it if you're doing a curved edge. Also, when doing a lightweight fabric like this, you can see I'm holding on to those threads and holding on to the start to start feeding it through the machine. It really helps for your fabric not to get like drawn into the machine where your machine wants to like eat lightweight fabrics. So hold on to the starting threads when you begin, and that will help the machine not devour whatever you're trying to hem, which is nice. But I'll do both sides like that, and then I'm actually going to fold this wrong sides together and stitch this once, 1/4 inch, trim that, and then fold it and do a French seam along this edge, just so that if it's ever like, because it's going to be kind of exposed, I just wanted it to be finished nicely. Hopefully you'll see what I mean. So now I have cut this, I sewed it a 1/4 inch with the wrong sides together. Now I'm turning this wrong sides out, and I will go ahead and press that and then stitch it again a 1/4 inch. French seams. I'm not good at explaining them. I never really use them. It's very rare, so enjoy this moment as I use the French seam. It's just so rare for me. Not my favorite, because you do have to sew it twice, you know? But I will have that bulkier French seam hanging in the back of my sash at the bottom. That just is going to help weigh down the sash anyway. And then at the top, I want to avoid bulk, where I stitch this down. I'm just going to tack it. I'm going to kind of like scrunch up the top of this and tack it to the side seam of my dress. So just trying to keep things, again, as lightweight in areas as I can. And then here's my other pointed area of my sash. And you can see I have sewn 2 layers together here. Self-lined this buddy, and I will press my seams open and clip my corners and make sure everything is laying flat and smooth, and give this a nice press before I start embroidering a spiderweb in black sequins onto this buddy. No one is surprised. The actual vintage dress with the floral sequin work is really pretty. I actually think I like that pattern better even than this spiderweb, which is saying something. I might add more onto this because I did one large spiderweb down here. I'm using a disappearing ink pen for once here on the channel to draw in my spiderweb on this, and then I will just use sequins over here. I'm just doing like a traditional like feed one sequin on, and then you go back through the center of the last sequin. Hopefully this makes any sense. Hopefully you can just see how I'm sewing this on. But these disappearing ink pens, the reason I don't normally use them is that the ink is quite like a light purple transparent color, so it's not like it would show up on dark fabric at all, and it's just so rare that I ever use a fabric that is light enough in color that I can use those sort of pens on. But now that I have the star of my spiderweb going, I can use that pen again to draw in the swoops of my spiderweb. And I will, again, sequin those. This is the part that took me several hours, several episodes of the podcast Dear Hank and John, which I am a nerd fighter, a big fan of the Vlogbrothers content, and of their podcast as well. So Hank and John were keeping me company as I went ahead and sequined this spiderweb, and I wish I could do it this fast. That would really have saved me several hours. Again, I'm stitching through only the top layer of this. I got a couple of stitches, errant stitches on the back of this, because I wasn't absolutely perfectly careful. Again, I'm still only, half off the cough medicine, So, doing my best here. And honestly, the cough medicine isn't even working very well, which is disappointing, because it's not like I get any more for another, 12 hours or whatever. And it's not even doing its job. I had some tea yesterday. I had some other herbal remedy mix thing yesterday to try and help. Not that drinking Echinacea Golden Seal anything is very tasty. Even if you can't smell all the way, which I can't currently, it still is not the best. I plugged my non-functional nose to drink the herbal things that my mom tells me I should. Sometimes you just gotta do what your mom says. Even if you don't agree that you need any more zinc, sometimes you just gotta be like, whatever, okay. It's not worth the fight. But I put some bat sequins onto my sash as well, and now I'm just randomly pleating it down between the 2 layers of peplum. So you can see I'm doing this on top of the longer layer of the peplum, and this whole area at the top will be covered by the short layer of the peplum. and then I will tack this other buddy at the top here as well. And I am just going to kind of whip and randomly stitch these buddies on here. This is the part where you are looking at a garment at the antique mall and it looks so pretty, and then you open it up and you're like, oh my goodness, this Edwardian woman really just tacked this together. Yeah, same sort of vibe here for this 40s dress that I'm making here in 2022. You know, sometimes you just gotta stitch on your sash. And honestly, if I were to take this dress to the dry cleaner, I would probably take this sash off and then put it back on when it came back from the dry cleaner. That's what it's like. A little bit more maintenance for having nice clothes. The same is true of vintage, really. But with the sash sections tacked on, this dress will be finished. And here is my finished black and orange Halloween 1940s inspired dress. Thank you again to my patrons for making this video and also every video possible here on the channel. I could not continue to do what I do without you, and being able to post some of these exclusive videos here on the channel this year has really helped me out. I hope you enjoyed this project from the past today, and thank you as always for watching. I'll be back with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, and crafting real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye!